Tracy here with another scrapbooking process video. Today I'm going to share with you how this page came together. This is one that I made while I was live streaming with my patron Tiaras, and it is using the Gather kit from MercyTiara kits. In this one, I show how I used an inset design with the cut file that comes in the main kit from the Gather kit. Creating a page that uses an inset design with a more complex cut file can be a bit of a time commitment, so I'm going to show you what that process is like and talk a little bit about whether it's worth it. I hope you join me for the process video. So I'm starting with these two photos that are printed at 3x4 and cut with a bit of a border around the outside edges of them. And I'm going to start by familiarizing myself with the items in the kit as usual, because I like to just kind of first go through and see if there's anything that I'd like to save some space for or make sure that I work into a page. Oftentimes, nothing really stands out at me, but like I'm thinking I want to put that fox on the page. I might use these trees. I'm just thinking about colors and patterns that might work for the page, as well as anything that thematically I want to make sure that I save some space for, because every once in a while there's something that's fairly large that I want to get on a page. And if that's the case, then I'll want to make sure that I plan for it. Now, these are the cut files for the kit. They do come with the main kit, and you can cut them up with whatever electronic die cutting machine you have. I have a Silhouette. And so I had just cut them up out of craft just to demonstrate what they look like. So I had this one on hand, so I thought I might as well just use this. And I thought that these photos fit really well in the middle. Now, I thought about switching to this color of paper because I really love that soft pattern. It's a bit of a purpley color instead of blue, but I felt like this color provided a little bit more contrast with the craft wreath. So I decided to do that, and I think what I'm going to do is mat my photos in this green pattern paper that I had already cut into for the other project right before it for the double page. This is going to be page 3 in my album of 3 pages that go together. The first is a 2-page layout about going apple picking, and then this is a single page layout about making apple pie with those apples. And Scott is our household apple pie maker, so he's the one in this photo. I'm going to start by taking the manufacturer's strip off of this Cartabella paper from the the fall collection. That's the Fall Fun collection by Cartabella, and I'm going to layer this wreath so that little bits of the wreath extend over the photos. And what I was thinking about doing, and what one of my patrons suggested, because I was live streaming while I filmed this, one of my patrons suggested that I could line those empty leaf pieces with green pattern paper to make the leaves. And so I decided to do that, but that's going to be very hard to cut little bits and line those leaves. So what I decided to do instead is to do an insert design where I'm actually going to recut that cut file, but out of that green patterned paper. I'm just looking for another version of it. I'm looking for a full piece and I can't find it. But when I do find it, there it is. I'm going to load that onto my Silhouette mat. And what that will do is, you might think of it as a little bit wasteful, but as far as time goes, I don't think it's very wasteful to do it this way, because cutting little bits of green paper in exactly the right shape to fit behind those leaves would not be fun at all. So in just a few minutes, I can load this paper onto my cutting mat and very, very quickly bring it up in Silhouette, because in the Silhouette Design Studio software, because I've already cut this. So it's just a matter of plopping it back onto a page. I didn't resize it at all. So all I have to do is plop it back onto a page and load my mat into my machine, and there it goes. It will cut. And it does take a while to cut because it is a fairly intricate pattern, and I tend to double cut just so I don't have to worry about pieces not cutting properly and figuring out what thickness my cardstock is. And that is a piece of Cartabella paper from the Fall Fun collection, so it is fairly thick, so a double cut is worthwhile. Now, as I'm waiting for that cut file to cut so that I can insert the little leaf centers into all of those little leaves, I'm actually starting to think that it might be nice to have an inset design for the background as well. What I mean by that is have one color on the outside of the wreath, like one paper on the outside of the wreath, and then have that blue piece showing behind the inside of the wreath. So I decided that that orange polka dot paper would look really great too. I do have the pattern paper add-on, so I have 2 of everything. So I can grab my second sheet of this orange paper. This is from the I Love Fall collection from Echo Park. And I'm going to load that onto my mat as well. I have 2 mats so that I can do this very thing, so that I can always have one in the wings getting ready for the other one to finish. And I'm just sending that to print. That's what I'm doing here. And again, it's important that you don't change the size of your file when you do this in between cuts. So now I have that design cut out in green, and I'm just going to start it cutting out of the orange patterned paper as well. And so that will cut up while I am doing the green. So I've decided I'm going to have this as my, like the blue be my backdrop for all of this. And I just need to, I really only need the leaves from this. So I'm just pulling off the other pieces. And I can't really go any further until I have that orange background piece cut, because I want to adhere these leaves to the background piece, which is the blue piece, but I need to know exactly where that craft colored wreath is going to lay on my background piece. And I can't figure that out until I actually have the orange piece. So here's the orange piece, it's all cut. And now I'm going to very carefully pull off, this is the piece that I need. This outside piece, that usually would be the piece that you're throwing away. Now I was careful, oops, there was a little piece here that didn't cut properly, so I'm just using my scissors to get that cut. Now I was careful to make sure that, you know how I said I just plopped that down? I wanted to make sure that it was plopped in the very center, so I centered it before I cut it on the orange piece. I didn't really care about it being centered on the craft piece when I originally cut it or the green piece, but this one needed to be centered because this is going to be my background. So my background is going to have the blue showing through in the center of this orange piece that's die cut the shape of my wreath. Now I do want the matting on this whole layout to be that blue, so I'm just going to cut a 1/4 inch strip off of all 4 of these sides. That way it's the design remains centered when I take the same amount off of each of those 4 sides. So it's still centered, and I can mat this orange piece with the blue background paper. And then I won't be gutting it, of course, this time, because I want that blue to show through in the center. I'm just taking some of this Art Glitter Dries Clear adhesive. It has a metal tip nozzle, which allows for very fine application. And so I'm just going in all these little nooks and crannies to make sure that this is really flat on the page. I often don't care about things laying flat on the page because I like the dimension that curled up edges give me. But in this case, because I'm doing an inset design, I'm going to want to have everything stuck down to the background paper. And an inset design just means that you're setting your patterns inside of one another. So see, it's going to take me a while to find the place where this will line up, but I'm just using this one sprig as my guide. And then when it all fits in, then I know I've found it. So here it is. It all fits in right here. Now, this craft wreath that I die cut is actually a little bit sticky already because it has the adhesive stuck to it from my silhouette mat. I just took a little pin that I'm using to pull out some of the tiny little centers of those leaves that didn't quite come out. And That fits perfectly. Now, I don't want to use my glitter art dries glue here. I'm using a ballpoint glue pen. This is a Zig pen. We do sell it at our shop, so if you buy our kits, you can add one of these as your add-on. I really love this glue because you get the same fine application that you get with the art glitter dries clear glue, but it's more controllable because it only comes out when you press on the ballpoint pen. Just like a ballpoint pen, it doesn't just like ooze ink when you're not writing. The ink only comes out when you're writing. And so this is a much better adhesive to use on this kind of an application. I'm just lining around the edges of that orange piece of paper so that the craft wreath will stick down and hold in place. And now it's already starting to look like an inset design because the craft wreath is inset exactly perfectly into that orange patterned paper. Now I'm just doing a double check here to make sure that my photos are still going to look good. Of course they will. They haven't changed at all, but I like to get that feedback that I'm doing a good job and that this is going to look good, especially with a labor intensive project like this. This is quite labor intensive. I just removed the wreath from that orange piece and I'm going to go and grab these little bits. Now that one I shouldn't have put there. What I'm doing is I'm taking everything that is on the outside of the wreath and filling in all those little gaps with the orange pattern paper. And then everything that's on the inside of the wreath, I'm not going to fill in and just allow that blue to be the background on that part. I'm using tweezers where I need to, but you see how there's little gaps here? That one I'm going to leave blue, but see that one I'm realizing I should have left that one blue. So I just pulled it off. You can see the glue there, but it's okay. It's just like a slightly darker version of the pattern paper where the glue was, and that's all right. I might cover it up with an embellishment or something. So every time that there's a little gap that isn't a leaf, so I'm leaving the leaves because I'll fill those in with the green, but every time there's a gap that isn't a leaf, I'm basically deciding, is it on the outside or the inside of the overall vine? And if it's on the outside, I'm filling it in with orange. So here's a teeny weeny little piece. It's sometimes hard to find these on your reference sheet, like on the cutting mat. And I would recommend that you leave your pieces on the cutting mat because then you can see the overall design and find the pieces that you need instead of taking them off. It would be impossible to figure out which piece goes where if you pulled all these off of the cutting mat. So I'm just working my way around the design, and as I do so, I'm working my way around the cutting mat and grabbing all of the pieces. The big pieces are easy to find, and then I find that I can find the little pieces by orienting myself to the big pieces. So there's another big one right there that goes in there. And this whole thing is laying flat, so none of these are layered with each other. It's completely inset. And now I'm just grabbing these are actually old Cricut tools from when I used to have a Cricut, and I'm pulling off this, and the best way to get these little bits off of your mat is to just scrape them to the nearest edge. And it is a good idea to like clean that scraper in between each scrape so that you're not pulling pieces back onto the paper, onto the mat, which is quite sticky and it's hard to get those off. So now that I've done that, I will put that away. And I do need to get rid of all those little scraps because I don't want them to be confusing me with what goes where on this project. So now I have the green one. And again, I'm just going to try to figure out where it lines up exactly. And what I do is I try to find a distinct branch, and then I try each orientation with that branch until it fits. So as you can see, I found it and it fits perfectly. Once you figure out where it fits, it'll be obvious because it fits perfectly. And now I'm pulling off just a little bit of the wreath and leaving behind, and that just leaves behind the leaves. There's also a couple of other gaps that I filled in with the orange that are left there too, but it's mostly just leaves that are left, and I can find them fairly easily if I go really slow. And so I'm only looking for exposed leaves here, leaves where I've already torn off the wreath part. And it's pretty easy to find them if you just go really systematically. And I'm going to show you a tip here for not getting mixed up with your mat, because it would be pretty easy once you've got a fair amount of this wreath pulled off to get mixed up about the orientation of your mat versus your project. So I'll show you that little tip in a second when I figure it out myself. I am actually skipping over any leaves that are on the little bits of the branches of the wreath that extend into the center. The reason I'm doing that is I want to be able to layer those branches over top of my photo when it gets to that point. So I'm just leaving some of the leaves on the mat. And that's another reason why it's going to be important that I keep this mat oriented in the same direction that the layout is oriented. And so what I'm going to do is just grab some green mint tape. It's just washi tape, anything that can stick to your page here, and see how I just put the arrow in the same corner facing up, so that if I walk away from this project and come back to it, I can easily reorient myself to where I was on the project and be able to find where the leaves are that I'm looking for. So these leaves go in those holes. So I'll just try to remember and put some glue in all of those. And if you do it in little bits like this, it should be pretty easy. I'm just using my fingernails because I find it easiest to work with my own hands, but if you would find it easier to use tweezers, then by all means, those tweezers, especially the ones that, the reverse tweezers, the ones that stay open, those are really good tweezers to have. No, they stay closed. That's the reverse tweezers. Now I'm actually going to lose a piece here, and yeah, I don't know where it went, but I didn't put it in when I should have. Yeah, I see what I did right now. I left it on the mat and put it in the garbage right here. But yeah, this is Tara who suggested that I do this, that I fill in the leaves, and she's realizing what a big project this becomes. She actually didn't suggest that I do it this way. She suggested that here I am realizing I lost one. I'm going through my garbage and I'm not going to be able to find it. I saw myself just now as I narrated this that I did put it in the garbage, but that's okay. I'm going to cover up that empty leaf that ends up staying blue. I'm going to cover it with something later on in the process. So as you can see, doing an inset design with a very intricate shape like this is very labor intensive, and it is not for everybody. If you do not like little fiddly repetitive projects, you probably wouldn't find this very fulfilling. And I'll wait until the end, and you can judge for yourself whether you think that it's worthwhile to do something like this. And I think that the answer is going to be, for some people, yes. And for some people, they're going to say, no way on earth do I want to ever do that. So I'm doing it for you so that you can decide whether this is something that you would enjoy. So I did some of it on camera, and I also did some of it off camera. And what I found was that it is, as long as you're systematic about it and aren't losing pieces, I think that losing pieces would make this much more frustrating. But as long as you're systematic and not losing pieces, it's actually quite soothing. If you like jigsaw puzzles, you might enjoy this. And the fact that it's very repetitive and very mindless can make it a very soothing activity, maybe relaxing activity for you to do. You could bring it to the couch and maybe do it while you listen to a show or put on an audiobook or a podcast or something. Now, as you can see, I did put everything away. I covered up my cut mat because I'm about to take a break, and I'm just finishing up, wrapping up my live stream because it had been 7 hours of live streaming, and that was a lot. I made 2 layouts, one and a bit, and that was enough. So here I am later on in that day without live streaming. So now I'm just recording, and I decided I would add some outlines to the matting here. So I'm just outlining, double outlining along each of those edges. It just helps finish off those edges. And I have inset every piece except for the very inner green pieces that will go in the leaves that might overlap with my photos. So I'm going to, I attached my photos to one another, and I just attached them so that they were strategically covering the door that I didn't want to have showing. It didn't look so nice. It was a little bit distracting element on the picture. And now I'm just laying those in place and trying to not break or bend these pieces too much, but I do want them to overlap with the photo. I don't want them to go under the photo. So I'm having to pull up some of the leaves that I actually had already glued down because they were close to the edge and I didn't think they would come near a photo, but they did. So I just had to pull those up and re-glue them, and now I just put a little stamping block on there to hold the weight so that it'll dry properly. And I'm going to take those last leaves. Remember how I said I'm leaving some leaves in the center, and it's so easy to find the leaves that I need because of those arrows that are on both my layout and on my cutting mat. I'm taking this time to also glue down some of the pieces of the wreath that were sticking up, and I'll just keep on using that stamping block as needed to put weight on these so that they stay down as needed. Not all of them need the weight, but some of them do, especially when it spans a couple of layers like these ones. That glue pen is a really great glue to use for this kind of a project. And now there's just a few more left, and I thought I would show you this process because it's always the most satisfying when it comes together at the very end and you put in those last couple of pieces of a jigsaw. So here they are, the second last and the last. And you'll see I'm still missing that blue piece up there. And I'm going to try to hand cut a little piece, and that's just a silly idea that I had that is not going to work, and I very quickly give up on it. You'll see me do that in a second. So I'm just taking a scrap here and I'm trimming it down, and then I'm trimming it down, and I mean, there are ways that I could figure this out, right? Like I could trace it, I could pull up that leaf and trace it, or find another similar leaf. There's a couple of different ways I could do this, but boy, after doing all the rest of it, I thought, you know what? Chances are pretty high that I can just cover this up with an embellishment. So I'm just going to leave it. The rest of it looks amazing. As you can see, it's really, really detailed. Everything is super flat. And from this distance, you might not be able to really appreciate the handiwork of it. But I think that when you look at it up close in real life, you can see that lots has been done on this page to make it. And I at least enjoy the look of it. Now, I'm not sure that I'm going to do this very often. In fact, this may be the last time I do this. I don't know. We shall see. But it's nice to have tried this technique out and see how it works. And, you know, I think that in this case, I think it was worth it. So I grabbed one of the frames from the Pink Fresh Studio frames that come in the kit, and I used the Simple Stories foam letter stickers that also come in the kit just to spell out Pie Guy. This was a suggested title from the live stream that I just remembered, and I'm going to use this as my title. Now I'm backing it on this piece of I Love Fall paper from Echo Park, and this is just a beautiful, it picks up on the craft from the wreath, but it's just a little bit more interesting than plain craft paper because it has this very subtle tone on tone leaf pattern on it. It's really, really pretty. I tried to trim that down in such a way that none of it would poke out on the edges, but despite doing that, still some of it poked out on the edge. So I just trimmed that down with my scissors so that you can't see it. And I'm limited in where I put this. It has to go over that leaf. So that's where this is going, right there. And I left a little space beside Pie that I could put a little embellishment on. And I do plan to use these layered wood embellishments from Pink Fresh Studio that came in the kit, but they're a little bit two-dimensional with that extra piece of foam sticker on the back of it. So I'm just taking off the foam adhesive and using it more as just a flat wood veneer. It already has some dimension because the cardstock pieces that are layered on top have foam between them. So I'm going to create a visual triangle with these 3 circle wood veneer pieces. I would like to use that stamp set. That's the Take Me Home stamp set, and I'd love to use it. Now, this house puffy sticker from the Farmstead Harvest puffy stickers that come in the kit, that introduces some blue up there to that embellishment piece up there, which is going to become sort of one of my clusters. So I wanted some blue there, so that house introduces the blue. And now this leaf introduces some orange, so this is a nicely balanced embellishment piece. I'm just going to add some adhesive to the back of it and lay it so that it covers up that blue leaf that didn't get filled, and it overlaps with the photo a little bit so that the pie guy and then the 2 photos are rectangular elements that repeat on this page and that are all connected to one another in a layered kind of a way. So that just brings some cohesion, to the page. Because combining square and circular elements is one way to have balance on your page, but the harshness of the squares can sometimes be too strong of an element. So providing some balance and having stickers that overlap and soften up those edges is really important. Now, whenever you layer squares together or rectangles together in an angular way, you end up with these little bits of space that are difficult to work with. So I just layered a fox in one of them and I popped him up. And then I'm going to put this circle in this other little awkward corner below the pie that Scott's holding. And so that covers up those 2 and softens out those 2 awkward, harsh edges. And the leaf extending off beside the G in Guy also softens the edge of that rectangular shape as well. So I'm ending up with either 3 or 4 clusters depending on the way that you look at it. I'm kind of combining those 2 circles over on the left into one. It'll end up being like one continuous cluster over there, so that you've got the cluster with the pie guy, the cluster with the moth, and then the cluster over here with these 2 circles kind of close enough together that they become one cluster eventually. I added a little mouse on this die cut piece or on this embellishment, and I want to position him so that he looks like he's actually smelling the pie. He's got his nose up in the air and he's back on his hind legs, and I think he totally looks like he's smelling something. So putting him right next to the pie, you can imagine the steam coming off of the pie, and he's just sniffing beside it. I thought that was a cute little visual image that I had when I thought about that, so I wanted to incorporate it into my page. And now I'm layering this other little sticker. It says fall, sweet fall. And because pie is a sweet treat, I thought that was particularly relevant. At this point, I'm only layering these little stickers that I'm layering with the wood embellishments. I'm only using one foam piece on them, and that's going to end up not being enough. You'll see me decide I'm going to peel them all up and put double foam adhesive on the bottoms of them because they're all kind of slanting down. I don't love the look. So here we go. I'm just going to add a second one, just in the exact same place that the original pieces are. There we go. And then I'll do it to the mouse as well, but the mouse is stuck down there, so like the foam stuck to the sticker, so I just did it that way. So now everything holds its space a little bit better with the double foam adhesive there. And I'm going to add a few extra little pieces here. I'm going to put some fall leaves amongst these clusters. And as I cluster these pieces together, you'll see that those 2 circles on the left-hand side are going to become one cluster because they will extend into one another. As I build my clusters, I'm using the design principle of repetition as well as a visual triangle here. And so I'm trying to repeat different elements in each of the clusters. So I would like each of those circles, the circles create one visual triangle on the page, but then a larger visual triangle goes from the 2 from the two leftmost circles to the moth to the pie guy, right? That's another triangle here. Or maybe it's a quadrant if you include all of them together. I'd love to layer this sticker here, but it's the exact same size, at like the same height as the love embellishment. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to just cut it out. I'm going to use another one of those circles to be a guide, to draw a line on the back part of the circle of the sticker. And then I'm just going to cut out a little circle piece so that it's kind of like a cheater method. It's like it looks like it's layered, but it's not. It's just butt up against it itself, the other piece there. And it does create a bit of an awkward seam there. So I just grabbed a tiny little acorn die cut piece to just put over the most gaping part of that little connecting piece, just to cover it up a little bit. Now I'm taking more of these little tiny puffy stickers. These Farmstead Harvest puffy stickers have all kinds of these little teeny weeny pieces that are really great for sprinkling in between a wreath like this, because it's nice to have lots of little details in the little gaps of the leaves and branches and stuff. So as you can see, the cluster from the two circles on the left are really starting to become one cluster. And I like it like that. My last touch is going to be to use 3 of these die cut or of these wood veneer pieces from Freckled Fawn that came in the kit. And there are 3 different versions of those heartwood veneers. So I'm putting one of each, I think, on this, but I don't want to see how they really kind of stand out a whole lot in their plain format of unfinished wood. So I've decided to take a ink pad. This is Petaled Pink from Stampin' Up. And the thing to keep in mind with wood veneers is that they're very thirsty, so they will absorb a lot of ink. And even though Petal Pink is a very, very soft, light color when you stamp it on white cardstock, when you put it on a wood veneer, it does become a richer version of itself. And so keep that in mind when you're inking wood veneers. Now I am going to be placing some of these confetti pieces around the page. And what I decided as I started to place them is that I decided that those brown ones are just adding a little bit too much contrast, and it's going to compete a little bit too much with the title. Right now, the word pie guy is the only totally black part on this layout that's a full actual black. There are some dark pieces that are dark gray. I guess, you know, the roof of the house there is a dark, but it's not quite as black as pie guy. There's a little corner on the plate with the pie on it that is really dark black as well. But I didn't want these really dark brown pops of color spread all around the wreath. So what I decided to do is I selectively picked only the yellow ones. Now the yellow ones are almost clear, so they're not a bright yellow. They're a very soft, buttery, see-through, translucent yellow. And so they just add a little bit of sparkle and shine to the little gaps between the leaves and the branches of the wreath, without adding a whole lot of contrast. And I did not want to introduce contrast at this point. Now see that little acorn that's on the half on the branch and half on the blue? I'm going to move that because that is, I wanted all of my little sprinkly pieces to be fully on either on the background and to not be layered with pieces. Now I'm just going to add the date to the plate, October 20th, 2023. And we'll call this one a page. So before I share the photos, just a quick shout out to my Patreon supporters. These folks help make this channel happen, so big thanks to all of them. Patrons get early ad-free access to my process videos, as well as real-time unedited versions of my videos. Sometimes they even get exclusive process videos that don't make it over to my YouTube channel. So if you're interested in any of those perks, please visit me over there. And here are the close-ups. Here you really get to see the detail of that inlay design. So what do you think? Was it worth it? Is this something that you would ever do? Have you ever tried this technique before? I'd love to hear from you in the comment section below. Let me know if you've tried this before. Even send me a link if you've got a picture of it someplace. I'd love to see how this looks in different applications, and whether you think that this might be a technique for you to try out yourself at some point. Like I said, I'd love to hear from you, so leave me a comment below. Thanks so much for watching, and have a really great scrappy week.